I'm Peter Okwoche. The top story this hour. Burglary accusations in South Africa's Soweto township have escalated into xenophobic attacks, leaving 3 dead and many fleeing their homes. Now, press freedom and the right to information are a central pillar to achieving peace, justice and strong institutions in any given country. That's according to the United Nations, which sees a free press as underpinning democracy and playing a valuable role in keeping governments in check. However, concern is mounting at what appears to be a growing trend of cracking down on media freedoms in parts of Africa. Recent months have seen newspapers, websites and radio stations come under increased pressure and scrutiny from apparently hostile authorities. In Nigeria, the building housing Fresh FM in Ibadan, just an hour outside Lagos, was demolished this month, with all the station's equipment still inside. The government claims it broke planning rules, but the owners say the demolition was politically motivated. Journalists in Tanzania have protested after several reports of beatings and intimidation, with the government introducing legislation to force bloggers and online media to register and pay a license fee. And in Mali, popular youth radio station Renouveau FM was recently shut down by the government officially to preserve public order. Prudent Nsengiyumva has more on the story.
Anger finds a voice on the streets. Protesters speak out following the closure of Mali's Renouveau FM. The government accused this man, Ras Bath, of incitement to hate and revolt. His irregular broadsides at the government during the recent presidential elections led to the stations being pulled from the airwaves. He denounced what he called the electoral fraud machine, criticized the army and lashed out against the government. Despite the Renouveau being pulled off air, he's managed to have his voice heard on other stations.
Politicians have disappointed the population. They've been on the central stage for years. Their speeches don't convince anyone anymore because the words are never followed by actions, so people don't look at them anymore. I consider myself to be the result of that vacuum.
With a large youth audience, Bath's broadcasts are influential. His 2016 arrest led to fatal protests in Bamako. But Ibrahim Boubacar Keita stayed in office following this year's elections. How much power broadcasters can have in Mali remains to be seen. Prudent Nsengiyumva, BBC News.
Let's get more on this now. And in our Abuja office is Samuel Ogundipe. He's a reporter for the Premium Times in Abuja, from where he joins us. Samuel was recently arrested for a story he wrote for his newspaper. Also joining us from Paris, France, is Arnaud Froger. He's the head of the Africa desk for Reporters Without Borders. Like I said, he's in Paris. Let's start with you, Samuel. What's your story? What were you arrested for?
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for having me this evening. I was arrested specifically for a story I wrote on August 9. The story had to do with a report, a preliminary report, that the head of the police here, we call him Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, he sent a report that the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo, said he should put together about a siege, that the SSS operatives laid to the National Assembly. That's the State Security Service. Some personnel of the service, which is like a secret, a secret police organization in Nigeria, was the personnel of the agency were sent to the National Assembly to take some actions that many people found really rather repulsive in the democratic society.
Arrested because of a story that you wrote. What were you charged with?
Yes, I was arrested specifically because I wrote a story about the report, and then I was charged for writing that story. They accused me of publishing, stealing secrets, official secrets of the government. But by the time I was charged with for contradicting sections of the penal code. The sections were, 288, 252, and 319 or thereabouts, and they said that these sections, yes, the sections had to do with sexual assault and murder, actually not really about
very grave charges there, Samuel. Stay with us. Let's just go to Paris now and speak to Arnaud. Arnaud, we're seeing an increasing number of what you could refer to as clampdowns on the media across the continent. Why is this?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to congratulate Samuel Ogundipe, because I had him on the phone just days after he was released, and he's been very brave not to leak his sources to the police authorities, despite several days during which he was arrested. Now, in general, as a watchdog, what we can notice and gets us worried, really, is the growing tendency of sub-Saharan African governments to significantly increase the level of economic pressure on medias and on journalists. We've had for years journalists being threatened, journalists being harassed, sometimes assaulted and arrested, just like Samuel. And we are still documenting lots of these cases. But apart from these traditional assaults, so to speak, to press freedom, more and more African governments are using financial tools to prevent critical information and investigative reports from being disseminated.
Indeed. I mean, you talk about, you say they're putting financial pressure on the users, because in a country like Uganda, for instance, where you have to pay money just to go on some particular website, what do you think citizens and the press can do to mitigate these pressures being put on them by the government?
Well, the first thing to do is to bring awareness, because it's not like in a single country. It's happening in many countries. You just mentioned Uganda, where effectively a new tax has been adopted that makes social media users pay some fees every time they use WhatsApp and Facebook. And we know today, like it's on a daily basis that journalists are using this social media. In Tanzania, blog and website owners now have to pay very expensive license in order to be able to operate. In Mozambique, very recently, the government has just increased the accreditation fees for foreign journalists at an unprecedented levels. So it's really a regional tendency, and the first thing to do is really to bring awareness. Then the second thing to do would be to sue the authorities for doing it. If you take the example of Mozambique, the level of the fees required are not constitutional. So we encourage local partners, local media and local journalists to sue the authorities in order to bring this matter to justice.
So take the matters to court. I mean, you mentioned Mozambique there, and, you know, when we tweeted that we're going to be discussing this, I got tweets from Cameroon, from Gabon, from Nigeria, from Ghana, people saying, listen, this is great, you continue to do this story. Samuel, back in Abuja, so you've been arrested, released on bail, charged. Arnaud believes that you should sue the government. What's your next move?
Well, since I declined to reveal my sources, I cannot mention earlier. The police are continuing with their charges. The matter was adjourned till November 7th. But notwithstanding whether they continue or they don't, the management of Premium Times, specifically, they are saying that they are likely to sue the Nigerian government for this. I mean, the police and then the government as a whole.
I mean, your arrest was a major talking point amongst journalists, but even the demolition of Fresh FM in Ibadan. Tell us a little bit about that. We're running out of time. Just a little bit about that.
Well, the demolition of the Fresh FM, it's been about a year that the government and the gentleman who owns the station, Yinka Ifele, who is a musician, you know, a gospel artist, had been over a year that they've been dragging it. But the government said it had to be demolished, and it was partially demolished, as mentioned last week, just a few days after my release from custody. And then now we are hearing that the government is saying, oh, we might be able to help you to build it back, which means that it was not appropriately demolished to begin with, and just as the man has claimed that this is an attack against his radio station being critical of the government, the state government this time around. There's a governor there in your state who actually is being accused of going after this radio station for being critical of the administration. Okay, Samuel, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Samuel Ogundipe in Abuja, Nigeria, a reporter with Premium Times, and Arnaud Froger, who is the head of Africa for Reporters Without Borders, speaking to us there from Paris. Appreciate both your time with us.